So I'm officially welcoming all of you to our session today, a session from our series on diversity and inclusion in the workplace, powered by Diversify and Her Space. Today, we are going to discuss a very interesting topic on inclusive communication with a special question. How exclusionary is your written, spoken, and body language? So we have some amazing speakers joining us today from different parts of the world. Chisom Udeze, Iva Ogrizovic, and Safir Bukhalfa. Yes, tried my best to pronounce your name properly. My name is Susanna Morden, and I'm going to be the moderator for today. I think without further ado, we can jump into introductions. So I'm going to start, and afterwards we will jump right into the questions. So it's very exciting. So hi everyone, my name is Susanna Warden. I'm a project and research manager at Diversify. My pronouns are she, her. I'm originally from Slovakia, but I have lived in Norway for 4 years now and have been with Diversify for 3 amazing years. I have moderated these sessions a few times before, and I'm happy to be back on the screen again with you today. For those participants joining us with visual impairments, we also like to describe our looks and our background. So I am wearing an orange blazer. I have a black top. I have my hair tied in the back. I have a pale face, which appears to be gray because of my background. And I have some lovely earrings, which are not showing also because of the background I have preset here. But I have a gray background with a yellow logo of Nordic Talks, who are also partnering with us for this event today. So if I can just call Chisom to introduce herself next.
Hi, y'all. My name is Chisom Udeze. I'm drawing a blank. Okay, I am an economist and also the founder of Diversify. I am a diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging enthusiast. I am I try to apply an intersectional lens to a lot of the work that I do, or all of the work that I do. So you will find me being an intersectional anti-racist, an intersectional feminist. Happy to be here. We've been doing these conversations now for going on 3 years, almost every month. And I'm really excited to learn from both my co-panelists and also from the questions and the comments that usually comes in. To describe my background, I am wearing like 2 different type colored berets. It's blue and brown. I am known to sometimes get my colors wrong. So hopefully I got this right. I'm wearing my hair in curls, and my background is kind of blurred, but you might be able to see a black kind of like image or reflection in the background. It's a mirror, and maybe some greens around because I like plants. You might also see my baby's hand sometimes climb up to my mouth or my neck. He's with me and he's feeding. So that's what is happening. I am a Black woman. I don't know what my face is currently. Is it round? Is it oval? Who knows? I'm wearing a black t-shirt. You can see some of it. Hopefully that was a decent job at explaining myself, even though I think I failed at that. But nice to be here.
Nice to have you. Next one on my screen is Eva. Eva, would you like to introduce yourself, even though many of us know you?
Yes, Susanna, thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you all from all these different parts of the world. That's very exciting. So my name is Eva. I'm the program director at Diversify. And I'm originally from Croatia and have been in Norway for the past 8 years. I hold a master's degree in philosophy and comparative literature. And in Croatia, I worked in arts and culture sector in project management and event management. And now in Norway, for the past almost 4 years, I've been working with Diversify as a program director on programs and initiatives that promote diversity and inclusion in the workplace and society. I have light skin. My hair is also put behind, just a little bit is down on the front. It's light brown. I have glasses. I'm wearing a white shirt, and my background is gray. And you can see like two small abstract kind of pictures, or what is it behind me? Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, Eva. Those who have joined us for this session previously might have seen Eva as a moderator of this session. Today, she is joining us as a speaker. And we're glad to have you. And last on my screen is Safir. Safir, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, thank you so much. I'm Safir Bouhalfa. I am French and Algerian, and I've been living in Berlin since 2015. I'm non-binary and use they, them pronouns, in English at least. I own a DI consultancy that specializes in neurodiversity, anti-racism, queer inclusion, and intersectionality in the workplace. And today I'm very lucky. My background is gray. There is nothing else to describe. It's just a gray wall. And I am wearing my hair straight, my black hair straight. My eyes are also dark. I am a light-skinned brown person wearing a headset right now for sound quality, and polo shirt, which happens to be navy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Safir. We are very excited to have you here with us today. So that was the introduction by all of our lovely speakers today, and we are going to jump right into the panel discussion with our questions. So our very first question is targeting all of our speakers. So I think I'm going to just allow a volunteer to start. But the first question is, what does inclusive communication mean to you, and why is it important to you? Who would like to start?
I'll go. I think for me in general, inclusive communication means basically a way to communicate that includes as many people as possible in that interaction. It also means understanding that people have different ways of expressing, articulating, and understanding themselves. So it could be something as, I don't want to say subtle, but it could be something as subtle as, pronouns that we address people with. It could also be something, ingrained in how we use assumptions about people to interact with them. So for me, inclusive communication also forces me to ask people how they want to be addressed, right? And also listen to people when they tell me how they want to be addressed. Inclusive communication also means that, at least to me, that I will make mistakes. I will keep messing up. I've been doing this work for way too long and I still make mistakes. That when I'm called to account, that I take responsibility and take steps to correct how I'm called, to correct my action and to do better. So in all, I kind of just think of inclusive communication as hearing people when they say, this is how I want you to address me. Yes, I can give more examples later, but I guess I can just pause here.
Thank you for the example and your answer. Any volunteer who wants to go next?
I can go. So for me, inclusive communication means a kind of communication that makes people feel valued and respected. It takes into account that we're all different, something similar that Chisholm said. We have different intersectionalities, and with inclusive communication, we intentionally include everyone in the conversation. And it's important to me because inclusive communication fosters the feeling of belonging. And this is something that yeah, I value a lot. It's very important to me to be seen and heard and valued and respected. And with inclusive communication, it is a tool that I can get that and I can give that. And that's why I think inclusive communication is so important in like in our work, in DIB work. Yeah, that's me.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer, Eva. It's a lovely way to see it as a tool to give and get respectful and a good communication that makes you feel valued and makes you feel like you belong. Safir, how would you like to give your answer?
Of course. I think it's quite hard to add anything to that. Both answers are quite complete. Yeah, from my perspective, I'm going to repeat a bit. It's about remembering that we are all different, but that from differences, there's a lot of richness. So creating a way that we communicate that is understandable and intelligible for everyone, and that makes people feel safer and included in the conversations. So for me personally, I think it's very important, as I have the necessity actually to go with inclusive language from the perspective of being a non-binary person that uses they them pronouns while actually presenting as a more masculine individual, and from the fact that I am also neurodiverse, I'm autistic with ADHD. So for me, inclusive communication takes a lot of different hats, and yeah, making sure that the speech is as direct as possible. So for me, they're quite a necessity, and it's really about accommodating people.
Thank you, Safir, for summarizing it and adding also your personal perspective here. I would like to ask Chisom my next question. Chisom, how can people become more mindful of how their communication choices may inadvertently uphold oppressive systems and structures? And what steps can they take to counteract this?
Right. So from a personal perspective, I think for me, a lot changed when I actively remembered and recognized that I am not the norm. And I'm saying this because it's important, because for me, living in the world as a Black woman, I know I'm not the norm, right? But when I have to reflect on how I can be more inclusive, I also have to decenter my not being the norm and also see in which ways I benefit from systems that are inherently oppressive. So that for me has been one of the first strategies in how I communicate, in not assuming that because I have passively accepted that this is how things are said or this is how things are done, that is the way it works for every single person. And it's giving grace both to myself and to others and not making assumptions in how I interact. So I think this is one way we can be more intentional by just remembering that the world does not revolve around us and our opinions and our values and our systems, right? Everyone has a different experience from us that is equally valid, right? I think that when we view the world from our lens, and especially when we live in, a cisgendered, heteronormative, white society where the norm are people without disabilities, it can also be quite ableist, so to say. So I think that willingness to unlearn is a first start. When somebody calls you to account, I really find that I can be quite grateful when someone corrects me. There's nothing I love more than being wrong, right? Because it means that I'm learning and there's somewhere there's something I can do to learn and to grow. So I guess to answer that question, where you say, how can people be more mindful? Be more mindful by remembering that you're not the norm, and that sometimes things that you might not even consider oppressive have historical value that is oppressive. So even learning things like, you know, when we use words like, oh my gosh, that's so dumb, or don't be lame, right? It's like, what connotation does that carry for people, right? And also even on things like, for the longest time growing up in the US, we always say like master bedroom. Learning the history of master bedroom, knowing that that came from the time when people were enslaved. Is that something that I want to keep saying, that I have a master bedroom in my house? Absolutely not. I could easily say I have a primary, you know, bedroom. It's how, in when we're trying to be inclusive, we say, like for recruitment, we say we practice blind recruitment, right? Do we have to say blind recruitment? What do blind people have to do with your recruitment? So it's in learning and unlearning and being willing to do so, that when we're called to account, we're not like, oh, but I don't mean it like that. Oh, you're so woke, or oh, don't be politically correct. Just hear people when they say, you know, so that's where I start.
Thank you, Chisom, for sharing some really useful tips with us right from the start. So now, if people actually do take your advice and apply these actions, there might be a challenge between the intention and the impact, right? So my next question is for Safir. Navigating the balance between intention and impact in communication is very complex. So what role does empathy play in promoting inclusive communication, and how can it be cultivated in daily interactions? And also, just when is empathy just not enough?
Thank you so much. That is quite a complex question, because I think in the last years, we have had a very clear understanding that impact is more important than intention. Yet I believe that at that stage in the conversation, we have to bring more nuance to it. So as you're saying, you're asking me what role does empathy play in the promotion of inclusive communication. For me, I already want to make sure we create a distinction between empathy and compassion. So empathy for me is the mere awareness of somebody else's feeling. Compassion, though, is the action, the desire to help the person that we have in front of us. So from that perspective already, it's about understanding that not everybody comes from the same background when it comes to impact versus intention. For me, for instance, again, I'm going to use my example a lot because I think it highlights quite a lot of those questions. For me, for instance, as I am a person with autism, autism is a social disability. The intention I have is most often good. The way the things I say are received often are not exactly how I intended them to. So I've had a lot of conversations in the workplace where I'm saying something, and then I'm really sure that what I'm saying is clear, is compassionate, is kind, and then the person in front of me receives it and tells me, hey, that was not okay. But then I think at that instant, it's important to remember that we have to have compassion for the person who comes from a neurodiverse background. So it's really about having some sort of an intention to understand that, yes, indeed, we have things that are hurtful, but trying to understand, hey, did we mean it always like this? Generally speaking, I really agree as well. I think the impact is important, especially when it comes to racialized conversation, when it comes to LGBTQI plus matters, to sexism. We have to be really cautious, and we have to make sure that if we are not able to change our speech yet, at least we need to be accountable. As Chisholm is saying, I love to be told I'm wrong, and I love to be learning from those examples, because it means that I will hurt less people in the future. Then to me, empathy, as I said, is not enough. It is all about having compassion and making sure that actually we can do it on a daily basis. You know, for instance, I don't have the experience of being a Black woman. It doesn't mean that I don't have any education on what it could mean to be a Black woman. I have read a lot of books. I've listened to a lot of stories. I've watched movies. I've talked to friends. I have a lot of actually knowledge about the potential experience of that. So when I have a friend of mine or a colleague who is a Black woman, I need to make sure that I think of all of those things that I have already known to then avoid putting her in a stressful situation, in a hurtful situation, in an unsafe situation. So this is when I think for me it's important to not only acknowledge that I'm aware of those things, but then be really willing to help and provide some sort of equity in the conversation.
Thank you so much for bringing out this distinction between empathy and compassion.
Susan, I don't know if it's just me, but your sound is a bit off. Is it the same for everyone?
Yes.
Is it just
Yes,
now?
it's
Or
breaking up.
is it
If
only
you-
now?
It's better
Now
now.
it's good.
Okay,
Tends to fade in
maybe
the
I just
background.
have to sit differently. Good, thank you for saying that, Chisom. So thank you so much, Safir, for bringing the distinction between empathy and compassion. I've actually never heard this before, though it should be common sense, right? But sometimes it's not as common as we think. So thank you so much. My next question is for
Susanna,
Eva.
sorry, I just wanted to add something to what Sophia shared. As also someone who's neurodiverse, and I shared this with Sophia and Eva and yourself earlier on. Also, and I'm still pondering this, but also pondering, you know, how we use empathy or compassion in interactions with others. I had shared that I recently wrote a message to somebody, and for me, it's really helpful to number my points or bullet my points, and they received it as really aggressive. And for me, that was quite shocking. And then I had to say, listen, I'm neurodiverse, and this really helps me keep my thoughts clear, la 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 la. So for me, also recognizing, okay, how is it, you know, do we have to announce all the time that, hey, I'm neurodiverse, so this is why I'm doing things as I'm doing it? But also, where do we have maybe compassion for other people who might be neurotypical, who might receive the way we interact as aggressive? So just like something I'm pondering as well.
Yeah, it's a two-way street, inclusive communication. So Eva, my next question is for you.
Just say, can I also just
Oh, please. Go for it.
regarding compassion, I think you know, we talk about it a lot, but I think it's one of the hardest feelings to actually have, especially in the moment when you feel hurt or when other emotions are in play. And it's really something we need to be intentional about and kind of learn to remember in the moment. And I'm not saying that I can do it. I can't. Most of the time I remember it afterwards. But yeah, I think it's also very important that we're talking about it.
Thank you
Okay,
so much for
shoot, Susan.
So I'm shooting at you now, Eva. When did your journey towards more inclusive communication begin, and how was your learning journey? How has your learning journey unfolded?
Oh gosh, you know, thinking about this journey, I actually realized I have so many journeys already in my life. And don't worry, I'm going to be quite concise, but I could have made like a whole story out of it. So yeah, regarding inclusive communication, the journey started at Diversify. Communication was always a very important part of my life because I come from a family that was very verbal. They always had something to say, and also in my private life, I was very social. When I started to work, as I said, I worked in arts and culture sector in organizations, so communication was at the center of my work. So when I started working in those places, I always kind of had this vision of like artists and creative people are this, you know, it's like spaces where people come together and they create together. But it wasn't like that. A lot of these spaces were very exclusionary. Those places can be very snobbish and elitist, depending who you know and how cool you are. That's how it was in Croatia. I'm not saying it's everywhere like that, although I hear stories. So inclusive communication wasn't even something that I knew about or even thought that it exists. So of course I heard about it when I started working at Diversify, and it was a process. The process is still going on. I'm far from done. But in the beginning, just changing this mindset I had of like, oh, I'm an expert in communication because I work with it for such a long time. Together with, if I make a mistake, that means that I'm a bad communicator and I'm a bad person. And it was really hard to kind of crack into that. And it took a lot of learning and unlearning. I've made many mistakes. I had many uncomfortable moments. Just gaining that trust that I can talk openly, that I can express some parts of myself that maybe are not so great, or that I'm not going to be judged or dismissed. It also took a while. But what was great about it is that we were, as a team, we were together in it, and it was just not me on this journey. It was all of us. So it kind of made it easier. You know, I had this habit before, to like talk a lot, and I always have something to say, and I'm interrupting and talking over people. It was the way I was used to communicate. It was the way that it just was before. You wouldn't be heard if you weren't like kind of grabbing for attention. So I had to become mindful of these impulses, become more patient, to kind of shut up and listen, to be understanding and accepting, ask questions, and just become intentional with how I approach and interact with other people. And as I said, it's still going on. I still catch myself interrupting because I have to say something right now. And yeah, and as much as it wasn't an easy process, and it's not easy, I'm very grateful for it because I learned so much about myself. I grew so much, and I did it together with my team that I love so much. Yeah, and I made so many much more meaningful connections with my teammates, with people around me. And what I really love is that it kind of taught me to bear this feeling of comfortableness when I'm addressed.
Thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with us, Eva. You have touched upon the topic of mistakes, and Chisholm previously mentioned that she loves to be wrong. So I have a question for Chisholm here. Chisholm, in what ways can individuals become aware of the impact of their words on others and take responsibility for the outcomes of their communication?
I'm going to piggyback off Safia when they talked about, you know, even though, for example, they are not a Black woman, that they have read books, they live in the world, they see the news, you know, things like this. So they understand to what degree what maybe certain experiences are. So for me, in thinking about how can people become more aware, I think this is also the conversation about intent versus impact. The reality is that there is no blueprint for how you address people who come from historically marginalized groups, Black people, gay people, queer people, non-binary folk, right? What works for one person might not necessarily work for the other. So don't say, oh, because my Black gay friend said this is okay, this next Black gay person thinks it will be, right? That doesn't work. So it's really difficult to say, here's a blueprint, here's how you do it. But recognizing that intent is different from impact, and impact always carries weight, because oftentimes, you know, when we unintentionally, and it's mostly unintentionally, cause harm, we center our intentionality and sometimes our fragility in the process. Yeah, but I meant well, I did not intentionally mean to do this. Instead of focusing on that, the focus should be on the impact of the action that has been done, and believe people when they tell you that this is how it made them feel. And if you believe and you listen to understand, you will more than likely be more aware, and it will prevent you from repeating at least that same unintentional harm to the next person. So for me, I think it's an ongoing process of learning that people are different, and people receive, you could say the same thing to me and my sister might take it positively and I would not, or vice versa, right? And we have similar upbringing, grown up in similar places. I've had, gone to the same schools, like the same spicy food, right? We're quite similar. So I think being more aware really just revolves around listening, asking questions, not making assumptions, and maybe listening specifically to understand, not to respond. Because when the habit of somebody says something, you're like, but I no, just try to listen and sit there and sit with it. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, sit with that discomfort, because that's a really good place to learn.
Thank you so much. Noted. Listen to understand, not to respond. Safir, your hand is up.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd love to add something to what Chisholm was speaking about. I think it's also quite important in practicality and really to be pragmatic when you are saying something that is not received well. If the person feels strong enough in themselves to tell you, hey, actually, that was not nice, just apologize and move on. You don't also have to keep that feeling lingering for a very long time. You don't have, if you misgender me and you go for he, him, I'll tell you, hey, it's they, them. Sorry, move on. And then you don't have to understand it right now. What you can do though is take that information back home and then make research for yourself and try to understand, hey, actually, why was it hurtful? You also don't have to always ask those questions, because us marginalized communities, we often have to answer a lot of questions just to justify our existence and mere existence. So it's also good sometimes to acknowledge, listen and be, hey, actually, I'm sorry, and then move on.
Thank you so much for adding that. And we will stay with you, Safir. In your introduction, you have mentioned when you were presenting yourself and you mentioned your pronouns, you said that those are the ones in English language. So I have a question. Could you share strategies for addressing communication challenges in languages with limited gender neutral pronouns?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I speak quite so many languages by now, and that some of them are genders, others aren't genders, but in most of them, there are strategies. So for instance, English is quite easy, they, them. But then if you go on to French, which is a language that I'm fluent in, you have a very, very gender language. It's always il ou elle, but now there are neopronouns that have emerged. So yel is one of them. Yet when it is in written form, it's quite easy to follow. You have a way to create your adjective endings, and in written form, amazing. In spoken form, it became quite tricky. It's very, very hard exercise. It becomes a bit of a tongue twister. Yet, for me, for instance, I've noticed that a lot of my friends then would choose the opportunity orally to switch from feminine to masculine forms. So you're speaking, and then if you're with someone that doesn't know you're non-binary, you can just say quickly, hey, I'm non-binary. I don't go by il or elle, I go by yel. And when I'm speaking, I'm going to switch from feminine to masculine. Don't correct me, that's really intentional. And then move forward. Then there are also other languages that didn't have any of those possibilities. But then, for instance, Spanish is quite gendered as well. Everything is masculine or feminine. But then Spanish-speaking activists and queer people have come up with a new ending to the words. So instead of A for woman and then O for men, non-binary people can use A at the end. So instead of guapo, guapa, you can say guape. And then this is actually very fluid when it comes to speaking it. So yeah, trying to find some strategies that work for you. And generally speaking, really going from masculine to feminine and always trying to create dialogue with people. Don't do it out of the blue. They're going to look at you like, do you not know how to speak that language? But also just telling them, hey, I'm non-binary and this is how I will. If there are questions, feel free to answer if you feel like. Also, don't always have to answer. But yeah, just trying to give a heads up and then use one of those strategies.
Thank you so much for sharing all this very useful information about different languages. I have a follow-up question. Oh, okay, Chisholm, please.
Just a quick thing that came up for me is also like I'm Nigerian and there are way too many languages in Nigeria, but I am Igbo. And I know another Nigerian language called Yoruba, and they're very different between Igbo and Yoruba. Igbo languages, in the Igbo language, there are no pronouns. Everyone is they, them. Everything is, inanimate and animate things are they, them. And in Yoruba, the only core thing that I see as well is in how you address in language people who are perceived as older or not. So when I'm talking to people who I perceive within my age group, I would use o, like Oshe, for thank you. And when I would have to speak to, say, people like my mother or older, I would say Eshe to recognize sign of respect. So it's quite interesting to see like how, and that is also a form of inclusive language, right? Knowing those things and putting them in place. So it's quite interesting when you start mixing in, I also speak a lot of languages and sometimes it gets confusing, like, okay, how do I actually articulate and how does my brain process what I need to be doing right now in this communication?
So I see some other participants are also sharing other languages, African languages that also do not have pronouns, for example, Swahili. So it's a very interesting world, and I think it would be a great discussion to have just on this topic. But my next question is for Eva. So Eva, how can individuals engage in discussions that acknowledge the various layers of privilege and oppression that exist due to intersectionality as a way to foster deeper empathy and connection and compassion?
Thank you, Susanna. I think we can have a whole session about this. So the first thing I would like to ask all of you is, my audience, our audience, what is privilege? What is the first thing that comes to mind for you when you hear the word privilege? And I'm asking that because from my own experience and from many people that I spoke to, many think that privilege is just connected to money, that rich people have privilege and that's it. So I think we need to move beyond that understanding of privilege, and privilege is actually a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available to a person or a group, and that privilege is usually not earned. And depending on the different intersectionalities that we hold, we can have privileges or disadvantages depending on the context. So for instance, I'm a white cisgender woman, and as such, I have certain privileges in our society, for instance, on the basis of my race. But I can also experience some disadvantages because I'm a woman. It is important also to say that many people in our society, because of their compounded identities, experience more disadvantages than privilege. For instance, a Black man might enjoy some privileges because he is a man, but he will never enjoy the same privileges as a white man, as white man does. And then probably on the basis of race, class, social status, etc., he may experience actually more disadvantage than privilege. I also, and I'm also speaking from experience, I would like to acknowledge that I don't want to like belittle anybody's experience in life. Life can be hard for everyone. We all have problems. We all have things to overcome. We work hard for things, but I think that doesn't mean that we shouldn't acknowledge that some people have it harder because of the systems and structures that discriminate against them. So to go back to your question, Zuzana, to have meaningful discussions about privilege and oppression, we have to educate ourselves about privilege and power and intersectionality. And privilege and power are connected, and because people who have more privilege hold more power because they have access to resources and opportunity. I would also say that it's important to check your biases and address them continually. As Chisholm already mentioned, listen and listen without interruption, listen to understand, and validate people's experiences and emotions. Yeah, here a little bit, I feel a little bit weird when I say validate people's experiences as emotions, like we're some kind of judges, but don't dismiss their experiences and emotion and invalidate them and believe them. Did I hear something? I think it's also important to recognize our limits. You don't know what you don't know, and it's okay. You know, you can fully grasp someone else's experience, no matter what your intentions are. So just, I think we all need to commit to growth and approach these discussions as an ongoing learning process. So commit to continuously educate ourselves, reflect on our action, and yeah, make an effort to be better allies.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer, Eva. You did mention that privilege might be a topic that is a bit touchy for some of us. So my next question is for Chisholm, because there seems to be a pushback against some aspects of inclusive communication, for example, talking about pronouns, the anti-woke sentiments. Why do you think this is happening, and what can we do about it?
Right. Yes, these are the type of questions that like unleashes me into a rant, but I'm not gonna rant. All right. I think that, so if we look at, let me start with anti-woke sentiments. I mean, these days, sometimes people say, oh, we're so woke, as though being woke is an insult. I want to be woke, right? Woke means being, you know, aware of social injustice. Like, why is that a bad thing? Are we going to put our heads in the sand and pretend that we don't live in the world? You know, I think the pushback is because we're dealing with a significant level of fragility. People do not want to, you know, accept, you know, the realities of the world in which we exist in. And it's also difficult to accept, you know, say, for example, privilege. If I just talked about privilege, you're nuancing that, you know, this is a fluid experience, right? It changes depending on the identities that you have and depending on the rooms and the context in which you walk into, right? So I think that there is a pushback because in my opinion, it goes against far-right populist agenda. It also goes against, a complete drive towards inclusive systems and structures that are also just. But I think that it is important that we do not yield values that are cemented in democracies, that values that are cemented in justice or inclusion, to say like the right, so to say, like in terms of we can't give up our values because it makes other people uncomfortable, right? So I guess one way to answer this is to basically just look at it from the perspective of, if you look at what is happening even in countries in the Nordics, like in Denmark, in Sweden, heck, in the US, right? We see a rise in perspectives, legislation, policies that are exclusionary to a large group of people. It is not difficult to use pronouns. It's like somebody telling you their name, right? You might mess it up, you might say it wrong, but at least you should actively try to do the thing. So I think it's in people not wanting to adapt to the current world as it is, to include as many people as possible in that process, and also to acknowledge that, again, that they are not the norm, that we are not the norm in what we do. So yeah, it's happening because there's a rise in hate, and hopefully there's something that can be done to bridge, that gap. And while we're in that process, we should not yield to hate.
Thank you so much for giving us probably a vanilla answer on this, and we hope to read a rant about it very soon on LinkedIn.
I also wanted a rant.
But so far, all these questions we have discussed can, of course, be applied in the workplace, but have been a bit more general. So we are moving a bit more into the workplace perspective. And my next question is for Safir. So we are all aware that language can be a tool for promoting inclusivity in the workplace. What are some steps and strategies that organizations can take to encourage employees to use inclusive language and create a more inclusive communication environment?
Thank you for yet another very complex question. So let me try to be concise and organized. I think the very first step that needs to be taken, so generally speaking, my approach goes between interpersonal measures and then structural measures. When I speak about interpersonal, I'm really speaking of interactions between individuals, whether consultants, leaders, employees, and then structural are more about policies and change of systems within the organization. So I think the very first thing to me is the leadership commitment, making sure that the leadership is committing to inclusive language and that there is a very clear tone that is set. No one is going to believe that this is an important matter if the leaders really don't find it important. So having a clear message and a clear inclusive behavior is one of the first steps. That's, I think, to me, in the interpersonal skill set, really making sure that the interaction between humans is as inclusive as possible. Another way to speak about interpersonal, for me, is about training and awareness. I think it's very clear that inclusive language is necessary in our society now, especially as we go away from borders and create a more global workplace and workforce. I think it's super important to understand that not everybody is going to be on the same page from the beginning. So having some workshops, some trainings, and create overall awareness through sessions that remind people that there is no right or wrong. Mistakes are meant to be made, and only from mistakes can you actually learn. Really remembering this compassion aspect, it doesn't go only one way, but it also goes to the way of the people we are educating. Then maybe when it comes to more structural measures, I think it's super important to review the guidelines of the company on inclusive language. For instance, in most recent years, I noticed that my pronouns were respected in one of my work contracts, and it made me so happy, and it made me really believe that I had done something. I had accepted a really good workplace, a really good job, sorry, at the workplace. So there are a lot of things that can be done, and it is really not so hard. So just taking the chance to review the guidelines, share some resources. Maybe you don't have the capacity to do trainings often because of budget constraints, because of the nature of the job. There can be a lot of different things, but creating resources that can be shared from a lot of different media, respected that actually some people are more into movies, other people are more into books, some people just want to read an article, and some people want to have a face-to-face interaction. So going a bit into that direction of fostering an inclusive way of learning as well. Being, of course, very open to feedback and an open dialogue about the conversation. Don't be afraid of your employees coming to you and tell you, I just don't get it. And then you can become a bit like defensive and say, yeah, but we had this training and we had this and that. No. Just be open and respect the fact that they didn't get it. If they didn't get it, maybe you haven't done the best job at explaining why it matters and how we do it. So it's really important to always keep this into perspective. Then into interpersonal measures, back to interpersonal measures, I think the use of pronouns is also very important, as we said, and not just in the signature. We see a lot of people that put it in their signatures and their Zoom calls, and then when it comes to conversations, they just don't really pay attention. So really trying to pay attention at the beginning of a meeting, maybe say your pronouns, especially if you're cisgender, because it will make people like me more comfortable to give their pronouns. Maybe also in general doing an audit of language. That's something that is starting to happen, because we speak about inclusive language, especially in a way that is about gender and about LGBTQI plus matters, but language inclusivity comes from a lot of different perspectives, respecting the fact that the language of the company might not be the first language of the people, respecting the fact that for neurodiverse people, the directness in languages is extremely important. Avoid that 90s idea of the sandwich feedback of you say something good, you say something constructive, and then you say something bad, something constructive, and then something bad. To me, it's very, very outdated. Tell me my feedback constructively, I will take it into consideration. The rest, unfortunately, is just going to create blur in my brain, and I will leave the session not understanding what's happening. Same when you're giving instructions to people as well, just making sure that you tell them exactly what the outcome is that you need. Tell them, hey, this is the deliverable, so that they don't have a misunderstanding in the situation. I could go on for hours, so I think I will stop here. Please.
Thank you so much, Safir. I managed to pack a lot of great strategies and tools into your answer. I will definitely make sure to rewatch this again and take notes, since I wasn't able to do that now. But you have mentioned that it's very important to get the leaders on board. So my next question is for Eva. How can managers and leaders promote open dialogue and create a safe space for employees to voice their concerns without fear of repercussions?
Yeah. Another very big question. Voicing concerns in the workplace is a challenge. And I don't know, maybe there is a perfect workplaces where it just flows. I know when I lived in Croatia, especially, I didn't have that option, especially the culture there. We have very clear hierarchy. It's not flat like here in Norway. So voicing your concerns, especially about your manager or your boss, was not even, it's not even an option. Or voicing concerns about colleagues, you don't even have anyone to do it to. There's no system or processes that take care of that. So generally, people are afraid to voice their concerns for the fear of being gaslighted, for the fear of repercussions, being shunned and isolated by their co-workers, and, you know, in the worst instance of losing their jobs. So organizations and companies need to put systems and processes in place for voicing concerns. And what is quite important is that the employees need to know those systems and processes, who to go, how. It's also important that the employees are assured that their concerns will be treated confidentially, and that their identity will be, if they choose to be anonymous, their identity will be protected. zero tolerance policy for retaliation needs to be clearly communicated also. And all employees, including leaders, should be accountable to actually maintain that policy. And it's very important that there's a process of updates according to the voice for the voiced concern, so that the person who voiced the concern knows what's going on now, that there is an impact of their input. And as far as the leadership at management is concerned, all these things in organizations, I mean, it's always leadership responsibility when it comes to creating an inclusive workplace and culture. So from their part, and for all of these systems and processes to actually be used by employees, they themselves should be an example. And here, I mean that they should be the ones who are open to share their own experiences and challenges and show that it is acceptable in that workplace to discuss difficult topics without judgment. So creating psychological safety is very important to create the environment where employees feel safe to express their opinions and to even challenge the status quo without fear of negative repercussion. And I think what is quite important is to acknowledge and even reward in some way employees who speak up with constructive feedback, because this actually reinforces the importance of open dialogue and encourages others to share their thoughts. In any ways, I would always recommend diversity, equity, and inclusion training because leaders and managers need support. It's actually a lot, and they have a lot on their plate. So supporting them by giving them tools on how to navigate sensitive conversation and address these concerns appropriately is quite important. And I think also training for conflict resolution is quite important, because leaders and managers should be able to facilitate discussions and resolve conflicts in a constructive manner.
Thank you so much, Eva, for this answer. You also managed to pack in a lot of great strategies and tools into your answer. So I would like to bring up something that Safir just mentioned previously in his answer about the different styles of communication between neurotypical and neurodivergent people. So my next question is for Chisom. As we know, communication styles can differ significantly between neurotypical and neurodivergent individuals. So could you elaborate on how organizations can accommodate these differences and create an environment where everyone's communication needs are met?
Right. I think Safia and Eva have shared some really good strategies that apply to behaviors that organizations can implement. In working with a lot of organizations across the world, some of the challenges that they have even before dealing with the issue is, they say there are so many different types of neurodiversity. There are so many different ways, different identities that people have. How can we actually know about all of them and provide interventions for all of them? Because realistically it's not possible, so I mean the time it takes to learn about every single person, they don't actually get to do the work they're hired to do. And realistically, companies need to work, they need to make money. So one of the things, a really good strategy is try to figure out how can you provide solutions for the most marginalized groups of people, because when you do provide those solutions, you inadvertently remove barriers for everybody else. And for me, that is kind of like one of the first ways I tell people to approach discussions like this or like interventions like this. If we're looking at things like disability or neurodiversity inclusion, you know, how can we make it as accessible as possible so people don't have to come to us, or we don't have to learn about everybody's specific challenge or identities in order to cater for them? And how do we start cultivating a culture where inclusion is just the standard, right? So for specific, I guess, tips, in addition to what has already been said, I think raising awareness is really important because it also helps break stigmas and stereotypes. Because I think that there's so much stigma associated with, you know, identities that people carry that sometimes people spend the longest time covering. Like a lot of people who are neurodiverse, people with disabilities, they have learned their entire life, you know, to cover, to fit into a neurotypical world that sometimes is even difficult to separate what covering is and when that, you know, they can actually show up as their full selves. I think raising awareness about what inclusive language is and being also raising awareness about changing potentially derogatory behavior or terminology. So if we look at microaggressions, oftentimes when they are said, you know, like for example, assuming that everyone who is Japanese loves, you know, anime, or asking somebody, where are you really from? Or, you know, saying, oh my gosh, you don't look gay, you know, like oftentimes we're trying to use it to make conversations, to be nice, to form connections. But instead, it will be quite important to focus on positive reinforcement rather than reinforcement or interaction that happens on the basis of assumptions. So I think also coming back to having an organizational culture where we don't assume, we don't make assumptions about people, we ask questions first. Like little things like this, it sounds like it's nothing, it makes a huge difference. Like it's a difference between having, I'm fighting with my baby here to stay down. But it's the difference between having a culture where microaggressions are rife or having a culture where micro affirmations, you know, endures. I think also promote flexibility in work. You know, for people who want to work from home, make that available to them. For people who want to work in the office or a hybrid setting, you know, have workplaces that maybe are quiet, maybe can be dark for people who have like sensitivity to light. So there are quite a lot of different interventions that can be put in place without having to ask any single person, hey, are you sensitive to lights? Just make that room, a couple of rooms available where people can go and work. And I think also have a culture where privacy is protected, because if people feel that, you know, they are supported, that, for example, they will not be outed, if they are not ready for that to happen, you know, that also fosters their mental health. So having that sense of, you know, I can share freely, but I can also have my privacy in how this is disclosed or not. I think that makes a huge difference in what organizations can do. And then ongoing training, mentoring, because you don't get training once and you're automatically a pro and an expert in this. Like, as people, we continue to evolve, right? So on an ongoing basis, keep learning, keep mentoring, keep sponsoring, keep training.
Thank you so much for your answer, Chisom. It just makes me wonder whether there is a blueprint, which I know there isn't, for like, you know, a style of communication that just eventually works for everyone. But I guess communication is not chocolate. It can't, even chocolate doesn't please everyone. So.
No, I also want to share this, sorry, just taking a little bit of time here, but for me personally, as a founder, and we have their colleagues, where to say it, but like, let's say I'm the leader, right? And we have employees in the workplace. It was difficult for me in the beginning, knowing where to meet everyone where they are, because I think my team knows I'm very direct. I probably write more directly than I speak, if that is even possible, and also recognizing that for some people on the team, they wanted smiley faces to know that I was not upset. Right? And then it's asking those questions like, how did you receive this? What can I do? Because I know that is my responsibility as a leader, to ensure that people feel like, when I'm writing to them, that if I don't have smileys, that I'm not yelling. I try to remember to add smileys where I can, but also having that conversation so they know that this is also how Chisom interacts, and it's not Chisom trying to be in your face, pushy, aggressive, or any such thing. So I think it goes both ways, because oftentimes there's so much responsibility on leaders to cover all the bases, but it's just not realistically possible when you're dealing with so many people at the same time. But of course, do I have a responsibility to model a behavior? Absolutely.
Thank you so much for adding that example to some. My next question goes out to Safir. I would like to ask, how can organizations ensure that underrepresented voices are heard in decision-making processes through effective communication? Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. First and foremost, please hire and promote diverse candidates. And when we speak about diversity, it doesn't only come with race, it comes with gender, comes with ability, comes with religion. Just having as many perspectives as possible in your leadership team is gonna create a very different experience for your company. I have been, for instance, recently working with an NGO that realized their leadership was really white, really cis, really straight. And instead of leaving it as is, they decided to hire new people, and also making sure that the new people that were going to be hired were diverse in certain dimensions. So this is something that can really be done. We know in Germany, for instance, where I'm based, so that's the context I know the most. In Germany, we need to have at least a certain percentage of leadership that is identifying as a woman. What does that mean? And how do we actually make sure that it goes beyond that? Because of course we have certain requirements, there's certain criteria from a legal perspective, but how do we make sure that this is also something that is done precisely? In that, I also have to speak about tokenism. We need to make sure that the people we hire are not just diversity hires. I think we all know the term. So a token is a synonym for diversity hire, is a person that we hire just because of those characteristics. Well, actually, we won't use any chance to empower them or listen to their voice should they be speaking. So they're really just here to make it look good and just stay quiet. So avoiding that practice is extremely important. Then I think just having overall meeting culture that is as inclusive as possible. We've tackled a lot of points already, but making sure we share pronouns, making sure somebody is taking notes, making sure the agenda is set clearly, making sure we have audio descriptions or subtitles if it's online for people that don't necessarily have the capacity to follow in the way a neurotypical person or an able person could, making sure that everything is said in advance. That would be very much something that is quite important. It's quite hard because underrepresented group is not a monolith, of course. There are a lot of different things, but if we speak about religion, for instance, making sure that we avoid having compulsory meetings at times of prayers would be something for Muslim communities that is quite important. There are a lot of things that can be done, and it's just having conversation with your teams and trying to see how will their voices be heard. Really making sure that we're not trying to get them a seat at the table, but that we rebuild a whole new table where their voices are extremely necessary. And they are, to be completely frank, they actually are. We don't really get positive outcomes when you don't have different perspectives. That doesn't only apply to race or to intersectional dimensions. It's quite a logical thing when you think of it, of how humanity has been evolving. So making sure that this is happening, then also trying to amplify the voices of the people that maybe this day are not in the room. Either they haven't been invited to that particular meeting, or maybe they just couldn't make it. Remember that those people also who already have voices are amplified. And then if the people are indeed in the room but are not listening to you, as an ally can also say, hey, actually, this person was trying to say something. Could we listen to that person and not let people fight for themselves? It's quite important to remember that it's a communal effort, and making sure that we are compassionate with everyone, not just the people that we look like. um, and yeah, active listening, I think Chisholm mentioned a couple of times, making sure that there is a desire to listen and understand, and not just to listen to answer, is extremely important. And yeah, creates overall, the last thing I would speak about is really creating a structure in a company where diversity is at the core, but even better, equity and inclusion at the forefront. Not just have people to be here and represent, but really making sure that those voices feel very safe to speak and stand up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Safir. I think you managed to pack so much into this answer and gave us a lot of food for thought. I hope there are leaders and managers listening in who are, really listening to understand and taking notes. So my next question here is for Eva. We have mentioned biases before in our conversation, but I would like to ask, what role does language play in addressing microaggressions and unconscious bias within the workplace? And how can individuals respond effectively to promote change?
Ooh, another question for the whole session. Well, yes, I mean, the language we use, our words, has a significant impact, either positive or negative, on a person we're talking to. And of course, everybody's like, oh, we know that. But of course, we know that. But so many times we are not aware of the impact of what we said had on the other person, actually. And I'm quite sure that we all made mistakes and may have used language that might have slighted or invalidated someone else, even with our best intentions. So we also have to think about that. We also have unconscious bias, all of us, that influences how we interact with other people. And I mean, unconscious bias are part of being human. So we should recognize that our own conscious and unconscious biases influence the language that we use, and how that has a huge impact on those we interact with. And of course, one of the ways these biases can manifest in our language is through microaggressions. And as Chisholm says, there is nothing micro about microaggressions, and she calls them death by 1,000 cuts, because of the psychological and emotional harm that these microaggressions can actually cause. And in the workplace, it actually impacts how people engage, how included and valued they feel, and how it impacts on their feeling of belonging to their workplace. So again, we've been talking about how leadership is the responsibility of the leadership, and it is of the what kind of a workplace they foster, and it has an essential roles in the ways biases and microaggressions are addressed. But of course, everyone as individuals, we can do a lot. So first of all, we can raise awareness about the existence and the impact of microaggressions and unconscious bias, and promote discussions about these issues in the workplace. I think it's also good because this equips individuals to recognize and interrupt instances of microaggressions or biased language when they occur. And it's quite important to say that these instances, it's not about blaming or attacking or making people guilty, because that is not a very effective way to kind of teach people. It's about giving constructive feedback, in a sense of focusing on impact of the words and action and not the intent. I think Chisom was talking about it, or Sophia, or both of you. Also, promote using inclusive language that respects diverse identities. We also mentioned that. I think inclusive language without inclusive communication without inclusive language and active listening is it's quite important aspects of inclusive language. So inclusive communication. So yeah, we've also mentioned like this inclusive language includes using gender neutral terms and pronouns, avoiding stereotypes, etc. And of course, active listening again, and genuine engagement with your colleagues' experiences. And that will definitely lead to deeper in the understanding of the impact of microaggressions and biases. I would also, for me, I think it's quite important that we all, as individuals, regularly reflect on our own language and behaviors. What kind of language do I use? How do I behave? And to consider whether we might unintentionally cause harm or contribute to microaggressions or bias. And of course, last but not least, I really want to mention here micro affirmations. These are small positive gestures that can really have a large impact on people around us. So just ask other people for their opinions, recognize their achievements, say good job. I think we didn't mention much, at least I didn't hear, we didn't mention much body language, but body language is also quite important in inclusive communication. So using friendly facial expressions and gestures is also quite important. Pay attention, listen, give credit to somebody else's idea. It makes all of our days better when we get that, all of us. So yeah.
Thank you, Eva. I saw that Chisom had her hand up at some point.
Yes, I wanted to mention, and Eva just touched on it at the end, I wanted to mention body language and share a story about body language. Because I think that for people, especially who are carrying, underrepresented identities, there are levels of covering and armor that I think they have to carry quite often in everyday life without actually reflecting on it. And I reflected on it recently because I finally, I decided to join a gym here in Oslo because they have childcare, so I could work out in peace. Normally I would do it at home. And I started to realize that every time I walked into a cycling class, like I just felt so uncomfortable because of how people would look at me. And when I would go to like hot yoga class, I found myself either wanting to sit to be right at the front or all the way at the back, and preferably by the wall, so I don't have to be between people. So I started to ask myself, like, why do you do this? And it's an intentional move that I make to, protect myself. And then I started recognizing that every time I walked into like my cycling classes, for example, some of them, not all of them, I was not expected, right? At least that's the feeling. I can't explain it. And I know the difference between somebody checking me out because they think I'm great looking. I know that, but that's a different thing from, when you're the only person in that room who comes from a different, who is not really expected. And one of the best definition I got on inclusion is that inclusion is being reflected, expected, and respected, right? And oftentimes I walk into a room where I'm not expected, and that automatically just removes any sense of inclusion for me, that I find myself having to protect myself, so to say. Also, just wanted to mention something I learned with Eva in the time of working with her, is also paying more attention to ageism in how we are inclusive in our language or not. Even something as simple as assuming that somebody who's older may not be technologically savvy. That's a word. Okay. And also, things like saying, oh, don't be such an old person, so just even being mindful of the little jokes here or there, beyond the identities that are often centered, which rightfully they should, but also recognizing the spaces in which we can also promote exclusionary behavior. But I just wanted to mention that body language goes a long way. And as a Black person in this world, I have learned very quickly when I'm not expected in a room.
Thank you so much for sharing. Kisa, I see that Sophia also has their hand up. Do you want to share something?
Yes, absolutely. I just wanted you both made me feel the need to talk about body language as well, because that's something we haven't tackled too much today. I also want to say that it's quite important, especially with body language, to make sure that clarification is necessary at times. So body language is very cultural. For instance, a certain culture, to address someone, you're not going to finger point, but you're going to use your mouth. That's something we do in Algeria, for instance, a lot. Finger pointing in some cultures is going to be considered very rude, but in others, not at all. So trying to also navigate those situations where we recognize that body language can affect people in a certain way. There's a lot of microaggression that can arise from that. While actually the intention was maybe somehow not really to give this kind of aggressive type of comment. So making sure that we clarify and say, actually, what did you mean by that? And then be open to the answer. Remember that actually the answer also matters, and say, maybe, okay, you didn't mean that. And it goes also for not just the cultural difference of countries, but also with neurodiversity. For instance, for me, my body language, I have zero control over. Again, my face expressions, I smile most of the time because as I am perceived as a angry North African man, I'm not a man, but that's how people read me. So I have very quickly realized that the more I smile, the better my life goes. But to be honest, as an autistic person, I don't feel the need to smile so much. I would most likely have that face and just go through the day like this. Smiling that much during the day kind of exhausts me, actually, even to go really in the reality. And we have something that is called unmasking. It's a process we won't have time to explain today, but that includes a lot of body language, because in neurodiversity, there's a lot of difference between how your internal world is and how this is translated into the external world. So those two factors are not necessarily going to be in synchronization. I can be the happiest person and I will tell you, cool. So you have to really be careful as well with this understanding and reading body language, and always try to clarify as much as possible when needed.
Thank you so much, all of okay, Eva has her hand up again. Let's go, more discussion.
No, I was just also inspired by Sophia. Thank you, Sophia, for this. I would really like to know more about this. But yeah, I just wanted to say that when I was preparing for this and doing like what are microaffirmations, one of them is like look people in the eye, and this is, for instance, something right, and this is something that in my culture, like how I grew up, yeah, you show respect. You show interest, but then I was like, I'm not going to put that here because not everyone appreciates that. First of all, from different culture, from different backgrounds, you cannot just say, yeah, just look people in the eye and that's it. No. So yeah, I think it's also quite important to know these kind of differences, especially if we work with diverse people. And what microaffirmations are for them. Like,
yeah. Again, I think it's very important not to center ourselves But I see Chisom also has her hand up, so please promise me this is the last one before we move on.
Okay, promise. I was just going to say that something we didn't get to talk about today as well. So I think there's a 2.0 conversation here is code switching and code switching to survive, right? And I know how sometimes, for example, just with one of our colleagues, Shantani, she supports me a lot in making sure I show up for meetings when I'm supposed to show up, and also helps me sometimes take notes so I don't forget the things that I need to do. And it's really interesting when she recognizes that when I'm talking to Africans, like she's like, it's a completely different person. Like my accent changes, my body language changes. I talk with my whole body. I mean, if talking with the entire body is a thing, it's so African to do. Like your hands are everywhere, you're hissing, you're making sounds, and they all mean so much. But also recognizing in the rooms where I can't actually be that, I have to code switch to whatever version of the world I think I need to show up as in that situation. And sometimes it may not always be received, you know, in the way it is intended, as Safia was, you know, also alluding to, that we also need to recognize, I used to say for the longest time that my face disagrees a lot of times with what I'm doing or saying, because sometimes I'm like, I'm really great, really happy, and people are just like, why do you look so angry? You know, it's like my face doesn't always agree with how I'm feeling. And also, I remember a while ago, I said, you know, somebody shared a really great news with me, and I said, nice. And they were so disappointed because they expected amazing, wonderful, you know, but that is not me. I say nice when things are absolutely remarkable, you know, so it's also important to understand that. Yeah, so just wanted to point, I'm done now, Susanna.
I can see Eva's hand is still up, but I guess that's just by mistake from the last time, I hope. But thank you so much for actually this very engaging conversation at the end, because it's 2:30 now. So our official panel discussion is coming to an end. I only have one last question that we usually ask our participants at every session that we run in this series. And that is, can you share one top tip for companies to truly practice inclusive communication, either internally or externally? You choose. Who would like to go first?
I can go. But my tip goes more to people than like companies. And just to be quick, my tip is just sometimes shut up and listen and acknowledge, and yeah, just believe, because it's so important. You don't know what you don't know, and you have to listen. That's me.
Thank you, Eva. Next one.
I can go. So my tip is in recognizing that each and every one of us have power and we have a responsibility in doing better. I think oftentimes when we talk about this within the workplace, we talk about leaders, or when we talk about systems and structures, we all act as though, or we all think there's nothing we can do. But systems and structures are upheld and made up of people like me and people like you, right? So we all have a responsibility in ensuring that we learn, we unlearn, we call out things when we see them, right? And take that responsibility, what's it called? Take that responsibility to heart. It's don't only show up in public. Safia posted a really great bit about allyship, I think some weeks ago, maybe, where they talked about, you know, the difference between performative allyship and allyship as it should be, where even when people are not looking, you're showing up and you're advocating for the things that you need to take on that responsibility. And I guess one way to just sum it up is be a buzzkill. Because if you're a buzzkill, people get to learn from you, get to point out, you know, that, hey, this could be done better. This could be, this could be done better. This could be said in a more inclusive way. That's it.
Thank you so much for your answer, Chisom. And Safir, can you also give us one tip?
Of course, and I will try to be fast. So first, not a tip, but try to focus on the internal aspect of DI first, and then naturally the external should be happening. So that's really, I think, the way it should be going. We have seen a lot of companies that are focusing on external efforts, and then you enter their office and it's only white people at every single level. And then you're wondering, hey, what are you actually doing? So if you want to make sure your change is real, make it happen internally first, and then naturally you will be able to communicate. But on a tip, I think for me, a tip that I would have for companies would be to stop focusing so much on having help from marginalized communities, but try to create awareness and acknowledgement about powers and privilege that comes from certain conditions, and really have workshops, have structural change on power dynamics. As I think if I was saying, we don't get privilege without we don't get privilege, sorry, without getting power. So really having workshops and conversations about power dynamics and privileges is the very first step. And then from that on, please focus on creating a allyship type of culture, where then you can really make sure that people are on board. Because if you try to create an allyship culture, but there's no awareness about privilege and power, nothing will actually happen. So that would be my very first tip for companies, especially, not just individuals, but really as a for the workforce.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sophia, and big thanks to all of our speakers and our panelists up to this point. This has been a super interesting, engaging discussion. I'm very sorry to the audience that we stole 5 minutes from your Q&A, but it had to be done. So now we are moving on to the Q&A with our audience, and it's really been great to see how engaged you have been in the chat. People have been sending in questions from the very beginning, writing in their comments, so that's amazing. So I can see a very first question that came in just 16 minutes into the session from Kuhele. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And the question might be something we have touched upon already, so maybe it just needs a quick answer. But the question is, how can organizations ensure their communications are inclusive and relevant without oversimplifying or unintentionally showing bias? Anybody wants to answer this question?
I thought Safia had touched on it.
I think so. I think so. Just now, Safir touched on it. So I guess we could move on to the next question. Hopefully, we answered what you meant, Kohele. If not, make sure to write us an email. We can have a discussion with you. But next question then was from Lisa, who was asking how to convince non-marginalized people that inclusion is worth the effort.
I can take that one. Uh, so it depends. I think it's quite a broad question. It depends if you're talking about regular people, if you're talking about people in your company, or if you're talking to your leaders. To your leaders, you need but to all the kind of people you are going to interact with, try as much as possible to speak their language. And the compassion that we're speaking about right now is extremely important. Remember that very likely a white, straight, cis man that is a bigot because of a reason. It's not just waking up and, oh, I'm going to be bigoted. There are events in their lives that have made them to be like this. There are also determinisms, where they are born, in which families they are born. So trying to sympathize and then eventually have compassion in order to tell them, hey, I know maybe actually you're very racist because you're afraid of your family being killed by XYZ. That is not a real thing. This is just a conception that they have. But already understanding it will give you the power and the opportunity to engage and create a communication. Tell them, hey, actually, why do you believe that? Has this ever happened to you? Have you seen numbers about this? And then you can really create a dialogue where you remind them that actually most of the school shootings, for instance, if we take the US, are made by white people. So why is it that you're afraid of people that come from different races when most of them happen from your own race? And really just trying to have a conversation and discussion, and remember that you cannot really minimize their thoughts. Their thoughts are as important as yours. Unfortunately, this is the way it is. It's not really balanced. So making sure that the conversation doesn't create more frustration, but rather opens a dialogue where maybe you're not going to get the reaction that you expect at that instant, but some seeds really will eventually bloom. I've had so many examples of people that I had conversations with when I was 15, and now 20 years later, they're like, whoa, that changed my life. So that's quite important to remember, that there is no such thing as little conversation. Just try to be as ethical as possible, and please do not lose your stamina. It's important. That fight is not a race, it's not a sprint that has to come with stamina. It's more of a marathon. So please remember that.
Thank you so much for this wonderful answer, Safir. I think it doesn't need any additions. So we can move on to the next question, and it's actually connected to the topic of compassion that you touched upon now and that we have discussed earlier. So it's a question by Kuhele again. Are there pitfalls or misconceptions associated with either empathy or compassion that professionals should be wary of?
I can take this. What is coming up for me is saviorism, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a line between, empathy and compassion, where sometimes people become saviors, and we have, saviorist behavior. It could show up on the basis of race. It could show up on the basis of, disability, gender. And so that is something we need to be mindful of. And I think also when we're thinking around how we show up for other people, say, for example, as allies, sometimes allyship also requires you showing up, opening the door, letting someone in, and moving as far away as possible, like not centering your voice in the conversation, not centering your feelings or whatever perspective that you feel like you need to share at that point in time. So having the reality is, as much as we can have empathy and compassion, you don't know what you don't know. No, there's no amount of books that you can read that really articulate what it feels like to be trans in a country where being yourself is a crime. Nothing can prepare you for the experience of what it is to exist in some structures as a Black woman, right? You can be prepared, right? But you have to wear the shoe to know where it hurts. So where possible, know when it's also important to take a step back and center the voices that you want to amplify, and center the voices that you are in allyship to. So there's a line where it could become saviorist and people center themselves more than the communities they're actually trying to uplift.
Thank you so much for mentioning this. Just so I see Safir's hand is up. Do you want to add something?
Absolutely. I love what Chisholm has said, and I would like to go also add something that seems quite obvious, but sometimes it isn't, is that compassion is not something that only applies to people that look like you. It's very easy to have compassion for someone who is from your country, who is in your direct proximity, in your neighboring country or else, but we really have to try and practice that act of compassion and have it happen for people that are as far as possible as yourself. Having compassion, for a disabled woman in Nairobi is a very difficult thing to do because we don't have that direct proximity. Yet that person probably needs it the most, because we live in a world where the supply chain is exploiting women of color disproportionately in comparison to any other people on the planet. So making sure that we extend that compassion to something that is much broader can actually be extremely powerful. And I think that's something that we tend to forget. We speak a lot of DEI in headquarters in Europe, in the US, in countries that have already a certain level of privilege, but then we forget that the supply chain, for instance, is an extremely important problem that we need to fix extremely rapidly. A lot of people have been affected by this for centuries. So now trying to understand how to extend that compassion and not only have it for people that look like us, that have the same social economical background as us, that speak the same languages as us, that maybe has access to the same hair product as us. It can be a lot of different things, but really remembering that it should extend to people that are as far as possible as you.
Thank you for adding that.
Just quickly, when Safia was speaking, that came up for me because they were talking about proximity. And one of the things I also like to stress is that proximity is not lived experience, because oftentimes we say, like, I have a disabled brother, so I know what it is to be this. No, you don't, right? So just remember that proximity to something, and oftentimes it is true that because of proximity to something, we care more, right? We care about this cause because we have proximity to it, but we also need to recognize that that proximity is not the same thing as lived experience.
Thank you for adding that, Chisom, and for clarifying it for us in the audience. We have a few questions here in the chat that have already been answered, I think, by you during the discussion. So I'm going to skip those, but I see a very good question here by Mila. Could you please answer, what role does inclusive communication play in preventing and addressing workplace conflicts and misunderstandings? It might just need a simple answer, I think.
Can I nominate Sophia?
I need to see that question. I thought just spam is not the greatest with ADHD. I need to see the rating. Who was it coming from? Arena, right?
Mila, right?
Ah, sorry. Could you please answer what role does it? Yes, of course. I think it's just about understanding that there are a lot of perceptions, there are a lot of perspectives, as many as people will be part of the world. So having, we speak a lot about conflicts. I don't think this is really necessarily the best word for that. Those are discussions, those are conversations, and those are somehow not necessarily always seen as constructive. Well, actually, we know that all conversations are constructive. So just really making sure that we understand that the role of inclusive communication is not to divide, but to actually gather and assemble and make people more aware of one another. So then once you understand that and you remember how to define it from the very beginning, you can very easily address all of those misunderstandings and say, hey, actually, I thought that because of my perspective. But now that you have given me yours, I can very easily understand that my perspective was not necessarily the most compassionate, the most kind, any adjective actually can fit here. So in the workplace, trying to make sure that we have also systems in place that you don't necessarily have to go through those discussions alone. Maybe sometimes you can have psychologists coming with you, you can have people that are trained in different matters to make sure that there's escalation and that it becomes and stays a conversation that actually leads somewhere and are not going to leave you resentful. I've had so many conversations with people where at the end they're like, hey, you silenced me because of this, hey, you did this and you did that, and I'm like, but did I really do that, or is this how you felt? Because I'm very sorry about the way I have acted. If that really hurts you, I'm sorry about that. Yet at the same time, I need to make sure that you understand my intention. It was never the case. And I speak from my perspective as a person of color. So this is a very specific thing. White people, please be careful with what I'm saying. Don't take all of my advice as applicable to yourselves. But yeah, just trying to understand how to create a space thanks to your company's policies as well.
Thank you.
Could I add to that? From, I think, like, one of the things I noticed from an organizational perspective, and this is, I think, something we've modeled very well at our workplace, is being willing to engage. Because I think sometimes that's the hardest part of it, because oftentimes, people would rather, depending on the culture as well, would rather ignore and hopefully disappears, and then you have people, for example, like me, where there is no ignoring because of my culture. I need to address it head on. But I think recognizing the discomforts and engaging and being willing to show up anyway, and also potentially reframe uncomfortable conversations to necessary conversations. So I think that for me, being willing to engage has been one of the things I had to learn, which was also, and I think when you're doing it from a manager perspective, like in a workplace, it's even more, sorry, my baby wants to join this conversation. It's even more of what do you call it? It's even more of, I'm losing my train of thought. But when you're doing it from a workplace perspective, I think, at least for me, it can be quite challenging to just pretend like it didn't happen. whereas that could be like the easy option, like addressing it, finding the time to create space for it, even when I disagree, because I also recognize, and I think I've shared with the team sometimes, I think I'm one of the few, I'm one of the only Black women at our workplace. And sometimes experiences, what's it called? I receive them very differently than everybody else. But at the same time, doing that and wearing a leadership hat, makes it really difficult to like navigate. But being willing to engage nonetheless is something that I found is really helpful. Nonetheless, also important that especially leaders and especially leaders who have, and people in general who have like marginalized identities, to know when to take time to just recover, reflect before engaging. You don't have to engage immediately. I think Safia had said something similar as well.
Thank you so much, Chisom. We have 11 minutes left. So let's see how many questions we can run through from our audience. But we have another question here which touches upon the topic of inclusive communication, but also possibly intercultural communication. But it's about addressing and navigating communication about, sensitive topics. Because some topics might just seem sensitive to some of us, or topics such as race, gender, sexual orientation, or religion. How can we respectfully address and navigate communication about these topics? I'm going to just copy paste this question into the chat for everyone, just so that it is the last question that we have here. Yes. So now the very last in the talk is the question that I'm giving the participants. I see Safir's hand is up, please.
Yeah, I think so my hand is up because I am of color, I am non-binary, I am queer, and I am Muslim. So I tick all of the boxes of that question. So yeah, I think that's quite important to remember that we should never make things taboo. Yet we need to be respectful about one aspect. Those situations, those aspects of our personalities or of our life, you're not entitled to them. So that's quite important to remember that the better the culture you create, the more inclusive the culture you create, the more those discussions are going to arise. But if someone doesn't feel comfortable speaking about it, please don't ask questions. I really do not like to be asked questions about my religion, for instance, if I haven't engaged with it first. So I love to have that agency and be able to talk about the things that I want when I want, and then be met with someone that actually is listening, and at that instant maybe ask questions and tell me how they didn't know, then becomes a very positive experience. But when I'm asked directly, for instance, what are your pronouns? I'm like, yo, hold on, wait, I will tell you when I feel comfortable. I don't have to share that information with you. So that's really important to remember, that the person who doesn't come from those kind of marginalized groups doesn't feel entitled to those situation. Yet at the same time, the better your culture is, the more inclusive your culture is, the more belonging people are feeling, the easier this conversation is going to come. So that's more of an outcome actually than practice, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Chisom?
I just wanted to say something, maybe it's not related, but one of the things I also reflected on yesterday, and it's a habit I try to implement, but it doesn't always work. I watched one of my friends deliver a brilliant, LinkedIn Live, and I had some feedback for them, so I was like, oh, great, wonderful. You did, well, I didn't say wonderful because I don't often say that, but, I said, I said, really great job. And then I asked, would you like some feedback? And I did not give that feedback until like 12 hours later, because if it's something that might make them reflect, I don't also want to impede on the joy they should be feeling, because they should absolutely be feeling joy, because it was really a lovely session. I had a smile on my face the entire time, but I thought there was a feedback I wanted to give them. So I think it was just piggybacking off what Safia had said, about, sometimes you need to wait for people to tell you that it's okay to do something, like even give a feedback. And I think sometimes as leaders, we feel a need to give feedback immediately. Maybe sometimes it's not needed. Maybe we need a break, and then reach out to them and say, hey, I'd like to chat to you about something. When is a good time for you for this to happen?
Thank you very much for adding this great example. Chisom. We have 7 minutes left, so I think we can still run through some questions. I have a very interesting question here that we actually haven't touched upon during the panel discussion, but I think it's very important when it comes to talking about inclusive communication, and that is inclusive communication in recruitment. So it's the second last question in the chat, if you see it. With regards to recruitment, how can companies communicate their commitment to diversity and inclusion authentically, moving beyond just performative gestures? I think oftentimes there's this clause at the end of like a job posting that people from diverse backgrounds are, welcome to apply, but that might just be a performative gesture if you check their website and it's full of white middle-aged men. So Safir, I see your hand is up.
I'm also happy to have someone else answer first because I feel like I'm answering a lot of questions.
We love listening to you, so please.
Cool. Thank you. So I think that's, I love the authentically part of the question. You can really tell super quickly just reading at the job ad whether that's going to be something that the company lives by or not. And what I mean here is that it is very easy to use exclusionary language in a job ad. And you will see, for instance, I'm going to use the lens of sexism, for instance, right now. You will see those positions where we want rock stars and we want competitive people and we want this and we know now there's a lot of research that has been done that those adjectives disqualify quite automatically people that identify as women. They will not apply to those positions because they don't feel like this is something that would fit them. So that is exactly work hard, play hard, 100% Chisholm. There are so many of those ways to exclude people. It's the same when we speak about LGBTQI plus people. You see often in the packages that the company offers that you will have an extra maternity leave. The maternity is something that automatically excludes couples that don't have a woman in the relationship. So that is something that is super important. You see often super trans exclusionary language as well. Trans people will not answer to certain positions because they have the feeling that this is going to be super uncomfortable with them, that they're going to face every single day microaggression. So it can really, really be easy to create those better job ads. For instance, avoid gender language. You don't have to say the policeman, you can say the candidate. I use policeman really just because it's directly gendered, but the candidate, avoiding maybe she, he, they in the job description, but just say you actually to create a rapport directly with the candidate. So there's a lot of techniques that can be used. I don't think we have time now to go for every single one of them, but yeah, just screening your job ads and starting here when you're creating is super important.
If I may just add to that, I think, for me, I think it's action speaks louder than words. It's in how you're actioning the values that you think or you say you hold. And there's a lot that comes down in communication, that comes through in communication as Safir has nuanced, even things like saying young recent graduates, you're automatically excluding a whole bunch of people. There are companies who say we want every single person, irrespective of identity, sexual orientation, this or that, men and women are welcome to apply. So there are things like this that show up, and it goes a long way in even asking questions like, is this what I should be saying? Who am I excluding in this language? And even for people who think they know, yesterday I was writing a white paper that we're working on, and there was a part where it said able-bodied. And I was like, oh, that sounds wrong. Okay, how do I look into this? Is it right? And sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But just having that questioning mind in assessing what you're saying or what you think is the inclusive way to communicate. And yeah, learning where you're wrong and like correcting yourself when you aren't, right? So it's just, yeah, that's kind of just what I wanted to say. Actions speak louder than words.
Thank you so much, Chisom. I think those are the perfect words to actually close up our session, because we have 2 minutes till 3 p.m. And I can see that people have been very engaged today, which has been amazing. So I would just like to, first of all, thank our amazing panelists, Chisom, Eva, and Safir, for joining us today and sharing their experiences, their wisdom with us. We have all learned so much today, and I'm very grateful for you joining us and giving us your time and energy. And we hope to see you all in other panel discussions coming up. I'm also very grateful to all our engaged audience. Thank you so much for listening in, for joining us, for learning with us, for writing in your thoughts and sharing your wisdom with us as well. And yes, we would like to invite all of you to join us next month at the Diversify Nordic Summit, as we are going to have a lot of panel discussions there. So next month, unfortunately, we are not going to hold this monthly panel discussion, but we are holding an entire conference, a full day conference in central Oslo. It is on the 29th of September, and we have a lot of great offers for tickets. So make sure to check it out. Check out our social media, check out our website to learn more about it, and join us for this amazing day, which will have a lot of these fiery conversations going on. Chisom, I see you have unmuted.
Just wanted to say something as well about Safir. They put out really great content. So I really recommend everyone to follow Safir and also employ them, give them, bring them on as a consultant, because they are quite remarkable and the content is always on point. So just wanted to say that as well.
Thank you so much, Chisom. That's very sweet. Thank you.
Yes, we have all heard that today, Safir. Really, really very, very thoughtful and on-point answers. So I really hope we will hear you more. But yes, now it's 3 p.m. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop recording.